This is Mount Everest. It is usually considered the tallest mountain in the world, but not everyone accepts that to be the case. Today, we will discuss the mountains that are taller than Everest, and why it is so difficult to determine what the tallest mountain really is. Everest certainly isn't the tallest mountain from base to peak, a measure of a mountain's height from where it meets the surrounding land to its highest point. That honor belongs to Mount Denali, which is taller than Everest, base to peak, by more than the height of the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. Denali stands at 1.2 Everest tall in that regard. But even Denali is only the tallest when you limit yourself to mountains on dry land. Looking below the sea, we get to Mauna Kea, which stands partially submerged in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Mauna Kea stands 0.93 Everest's base to peak above the water. This is very impressive on its own, but consider that underwater, from the bottom of the ocean to sea level, it measures 1.3 Everest tall, and you can start to see why so many people consider Mauna Kea to be the world's tallest mountain. So again, above the water it is 9/10 as much of a climb as Everest is. And below the water, it is taller than Mount Everest. In total, this mountain measures 2.3 Everests in height. That's right, we have a mountain that is over twice the height of Everest, just hiding out in the middle of the ocean. Some claim that the similarly underwater Mount Lam Lam is actually the world's tallest. However, Mount Lam Lam tops out at only 0.08 Everests above sea level. This is because this particular mountain sits on the edge of the Mariana Trench. The Mariana Trench is the deepest point underwater anywhere in the world. If you wanted to measure the mountain from the bottom half of the Mariana Trench, it would reach a staggering 2.5 Everests tall. But unfortunately for Mount Lam Lam, many experts think that this is a bit of a stretch. But Mount Everest is at least the highest mountain in the world, right? Still no. That honor belongs to Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador. This is a bit of an odd one, because if you measure Chimborazo, it's only half an Everest tall, which doesn't sound that impressive. You have to really zoom out to see it. Here we can see our whole planet. Earth is not actually perfectly round like it's frequently depicted. Like many of us, Earth is a little wider at the waist than it would like to be. Earth is over 4.5 Everests wider by the equator than it is by the poles. On top of that bulge by the equator is the Andes Mountains. And here we find Mount Chimborazo, which stands a little less than half an Everest higher from the center of the Earth than Mount Everest itself does. Yet there is one mountain that is bigger than all of those mountains. It's just a little hard to get to. This is Olympus Mons, the largest mountain in the solar system. It stands at a mind-boggling 4.8 Everests tall, base to peak. So with all those mountains being larger than Everest, one way or the other, how does Mount Everest claim to be number one? Well, I'm afraid to admit I've been deceiving you, because I've been referring to the base to peak height of Mount Everest. But typically, the height of a mountain is measured from sea level to its peak. So using that system, since Mauna Kea is mostly underwater, it tops out at 4,200 meters above sea level, while Denali, with its higher summit, is only 6,190 meters above sea level. Mount Chimborazo is the highest point from the Earth's core, but sea level itself is higher by the equator, as the sea rises along with the bulges of the Earth. And so even that mountain tops out at 6,250 meters above sea level. Meanwhile, Olympus Mons is on Mars, which doesn't have any seas. This means that there is no sea level for it to be above. Therefore, Mount Everest wins this particular metric at 8,850 meters above sea level. So what do you think? Which mountain really is the tallest? And what do you think is the best way to measure the height of a mountain?